The air was heavy with the weight of my choices as I stepped off the plane, the cold biting at my skin. America, the land of dreams, felt more like a land of shadows to me. I had left behind everything I knew, my home, my family, the warmth of familiar faces, all for the promise of a better life. My mother's words echoed in my heart like a prayer: be strong, be careful, and never forget who you are. But as I stood there, alone in a world that felt so foreign, I wondered if I could live up to her hopes. Finding work was a battle. My hijab marked me as different, and my accent made me an outsider. Some people looked at me with curiosity, others with something darker, something I couldn't quite name. But I refused to give up. I had to survive. And then, one day, it seemed like my prayers had been answered. A family offered me a job as their nanny. A place to stay, a steady income, and children to care for. It felt like the fresh start I desperately needed. The house was beautiful, filled with light and laughter. The wife greeted me first, elegant, professional, always in a hurry. Her smile was polite but distant, her handshake firm. She was a woman who put work first, and I could sense the weight of her absence even before she left the room. Then he walked in, the husband. His presence filled the space in a way that made my breath catch. He was tall, confident, with a smile that felt too warm, too inviting. "Welcome to our home," he said, his voice smooth and kind. "We are lucky to have you." His eyes met mine, and for a moment, I forgot to breathe. I looked away quickly, telling myself it was nothing. But deep inside, something stirred. The days passed, and I settled into my role. The wife was rarely home, her job keeping her away late into the night. That meant I spent more time with him. At first, it was just kindness, a cup of tea when I looked tired, a blanket when I sat outside in the cold. "You're doing a great job," he would say, his voice soft. "The children love you. We appreciate you." I told myself it was nothing, that he was just a kind man. But my heart betrayed me. I found myself waiting for his words, longing for his presence. It started with small things, compliments, shared laughter, lingering glances. One rainy afternoon, as I washed dishes in the quiet kitchen, he stood by the window, watching the rain. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" he said, his voice softer than usual. I nodded, my hands trembling as I focused on the dishes. He stepped closer. "You work too hard. Do you ever take a break?" I forced a laugh, but my heart was racing. "You're special," he said, his words sending a shiver down my spine. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Because deep inside, I knew this was no longer just kindness. I was standing at the edge of something dangerous. The nights became unbearable. I tossed and turned, my mind replaying every moment, every word. I whispered prayers, begging God to guide me away from temptation. But my heart refused to listen. I thought about the way he smiled, the way he noticed the smallest things about me. I hated myself for it. He was married. He had a wife who trusted me, children who loved me. How could I let these feelings take root? But no matter how much I scolded myself, I couldn't ignore the truth. I liked the way he made me feel. Days turned into weeks, and the tension between us grew. I tried to avoid him, burying myself in work, but he always found a way to be near me. One afternoon, as I folded laundry, he stepped into the room. "You never take breaks," he said, his voice gentle. "You work so hard for this family." "For me." I swallowed, my heart pounding. "It's my job," I replied, but my voice trembled. "It's more than just a job to you," he said, stepping closer. "You're special. I see you." I couldn't look at him. If I did, I knew I would see something in his eyes that I wasn't ready to acknowledge. "Sir, we can't," I whispered. "I know," he said, his voice breaking. But tell me you don't feel it too. I felt it. I felt it in the way my heart raced, in the way my skin tingled under his gaze. I felt it in the nights I lay awake, thinking about moments like this. But I couldn't say it. Saying it would make it real. And if it became real, there would be no turning back. You have a wife, I said, my voice barely audible. A family. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. She's never here. That doesn't change what's right and wrong, I replied, but my resolve was crumbling. He stepped closer, his hand brushing mine. If you ever change your mind. And then he was gone. I stood there, my heart pounding, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. I should have felt relief. I should have thanked God that nothing had happened. But instead, I felt something terrifying, disappointment. And that was when I knew I was already too far gone. The days blurred together, and our stolen moments became routine. Longer conversations, lingering glances, accidental touches that neither of us pulled away from. I told myself every morning that today would be different, that I would keep my distance. But by afternoon, I would find myself drawn to him again. I lived for those moments, and I hated myself for it. I felt like I was trapped in a web of emotions I never asked for. Every time I prayed, I asked for strength. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face. One evening, as I put the children to sleep, he found me in the hallway. They love you, he said, his voice soft. So are you, I replied, my heart aching. He stepped closer, his eyes searching mine. You're more than just the nanny. You're part of this home. I wanted to believe him, but I knew the truth. I didn't belong here. Not like this. The guilt became unbearable. Every time his wife thanked me, every time the children hugged me, I felt like I was suffocating. I avoided her eyes, avoided my own reflection. I told myself I wasn't taking her place, but deep down, I knew better. I started dressing differently, wearing the colors he liked, memorizing the way he took his coffee. I was slipping into something dangerous, something that didn't belong to me. But I didn't want to stop. And then it happened. One rainy night, as the children slept, he found me in the kitchen. Do you drink? He asked, holding a glass of wine. I shook my head, my heart racing. He stepped closer, his voice low. Can we talk? I should have walked away. I should have reminded him of his wife, his family. But I stayed. He reached out, touching my arm gently. Tell me to stop, and I will. I opened my mouth, but no words came. His touch burned through me, igniting something I had fought so hard to suppress. Before I knew it, our lips met. It was slow at first, hesitant. Then hunger took over. He carried me to his room, their room, and as his hands traced every inch of my body, I whispered, my faith. My religion. But those words faded into the night. That night was the beginning of a storm neither of us could stop. It wasn't just one night. It wasn't just a mistake. It became our secret, our routine. Mornings were filled with stolen glances, afternoons with lingering touches, and nights with passion that consumed us both. I lost myself in him. I craved his touch, his words, the way he made me feel like I was the only woman in the world. But every morning, guilt clawed at my heart. Guilt became my constant companion. Every time his wife spoke to me, every time she thanked me for taking care of her children, I felt like I was suffocating. I avoided her eyes. I avoided my own reflection. I avoided thinking about the truth. But the guilt wasn't enough to stop me. Not when he looked at me like I was the most important person in his world. Then one day, everything fell apart. His wife looked at me differently, a pause in her greeting, a hesitation in her smile. She knew. She didn't have proof, but she felt it. A wife always knows when something is wrong. I had to leave. That night, I sat outside, lost in my thoughts. He found me there, concern in his eyes. "You've been distant," he said. "What's wrong?" I inhaled sharply. "I can't do this anymore." His expression changed, his jaw tightening. "Don't say that." I stood up, forcing myself to be strong. "I have to go." He reached for my hand, his grip firm. "Stay." Tears burned in my eyes. "I can't." The next day, I handed in my resignation. His wife was surprised, asking me why, telling me I was part of their family. I had no answer that wouldn't betray me. When I packed my bags, I placed the bracelet he had given me on the nightstand. I walked away, carrying nothing but my guilt and the lesson I would never forget. I had crossed a line, and some lines could never be uncrossed. The day before I left, one of the children asked me a question that nearly broke me. "Are you going to leave us?" Her voice was small, innocent. I swallowed hard. "Why would you ask that?" She fiddled with the hem of her dress. "Because you don't smile anymore. And you don't laugh with Daddy like before." The weight of her words pressed against my chest like a heavy stone. I had let myself become part of this family, and she had noticed the shift in me. "I will always love you," I said, my voice trembling. "No matter what." She didn't understand, and I prayed she never would. The night before I left, I sat in my room, staring at my packed bags. My heart ached with every breath I took. He came to me one last time. "Don't do this," he whispered. "Stay." I shook my head, tears slipping down my cheeks. "We both know this has to end." He stepped closer, his hands reaching for me. "I love you." I closed my eyes, letting those words sink in one last time. "You have a wife. A family. You don't belong to me." His fingers traced my cheek. "But I want to." I pulled away, summoning every ounce of strength I had left. "No, you don't. You just think you do." He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "I can't lose you." I picked up my bag and stepped past him. "You already have." I walked out without looking back. Even when I heard his sharp intake of breath. Even when I felt his gaze burning into my back. Even when my heart shattered into pieces. I didn't go straight home. Couldn't. Instead, I found myself in a quiet park, sitting on a wooden bench, staring at the sky. I thought of my mother, of the night she had held my hands, telling me that God's mercy was endless. That no mistake was too great to be forgiven. But could I forgive myself? I closed my eyes and whispered the words I had been too afraid to say before. "I'm sorry." Sorry to the wife who had trusted me. Sorry to the children who had loved me. Sorry to myself for allowing my heart to lead me where I should never have gone. Tears fell freely. But for the first time in months, they weren't tears of guilt. They were tears of release. I knew the road to forgiveness wouldn't be easy. But I had taken the first step. And that was enough for now.